Hey now, welcome to America's leading Formula One podcast. I'm Brian Saperstein. This is Rob Vale, and we are at the dirty side of the track. Rob, what are we doing this week?
This week, we are going to be doing our crash course into Formula One. For all those new listeners, hopefully something to help educate them. So when they're watching the races, things make sense. And for the veterans out there, it'll be ammunition for them to poke fun at us when we make lots and lots of mistakes, and they can revel in pointing that out to us. So really looking forward to this.
Another thing to think about as we kind of look at the races are the tires and the pit stop strategy. So this one is a little bit inside baseball, but I want to kind of make...
For everyone else listening, this is a incoming nerd attack. So Brian's going to nerd out on tires now. So if you need to go and put a cup of coffee on, then just do it now.
Well, here's the new SAP stats still. SAP stats. So Pirelli are the tire supplier for all the F1 teams. And so all teams get the same tires on every weekend. They get the same allocation. So there's not technically a tire advantage. Everyone gets the same amount of the same tires. This is only the third year of the system, I would note, though, because they used to be able to choose the allocation of the tires they got a little differently. There are 3 dry tires at every race, 3, a hard, a medium, and a soft. There are 2 wet tires. The dry tires are sort of slicks, as I'm used to calling them, where there's no real tread or pattern to them. But the wet tires have different depth and tread of pattern. And the 2 wets are the green stripe intermediates, or as people would call them, inters, and the blue stripe, sort of the Noah's Ark, get 2 of everything and let's get the hell out of here, full wets. And so it's very rare when you see the full wets come out, the blue stripes. The greens, though, are pretty common when you get a drizzle, light rain. It has better handling, better traction, the inters. The 3 that they bring for the dry races, though, the red is the soft, the yellow is the medium, and the white is the hard. And I'm going to say this again because I'm about to make everyone confused. The red is the soft, the yellow is the medium, and the white is the hard. Why is it confusing? Because technically, and you'll see this on the race, there are 5 compounds of dry tires. C1 is the hardest and C5 is the softest. So at any given race weekend, Pirelli are going to bring 3 tires in a row to that race. However, they're not always the same. So it's going to be different every time. The softest will always be the red, the medium will always be the yellow, and the white will always be the hard. But like at Silverstone last year, they used the C1, the C2, and the C3. So the C1 was the white hard. The C3 is the soft red. And then you go to Abu Dhabi to end the year, and they have the softest, the C3, C4, and C5. So now the C3, which was the red soft, same tire at Silverstone, is now the white hard, same tire at Abu Dhabi. So it is very confusing, but they always bring 3 in a row. Could be the C2, C3, C4, C3, C4, C5. It doesn't matter. Back to my point. Red is soft, yellow is medium, white is hard. And so why does that matter, you may say? The reds are the softest. They get the fastest grip off the line. They wear off the fastest, though. They wear down. They lose traction. They're not as good. They turn into a big, hot, gooey mess of tire, and you start losing time. However, the whites are the inverse. They last the longest, but they start off like bricks. You're going to get the worst traction off the line. They take the longest to warm up. They may last the longest, but you're going to have the slower speeds in the beginning. And so that makes it interesting for one thing that we really haven't talked about in qualifying. If you get into Q3, the last qualifying session, the top 10, you have to use the exact tire you finished with in Q2. So now I'm not saying the same type. I mean the exact same effing tire. So when you finish Q2 qualifying, if you make the top 10, they put a mark on it. That's what you start the race on. So you have to kind of do a strategy to say, what kind of pit stop strategy am I on? What tire do I want to be on? Everyone in Q3, the last qualifying session, uses softs, because you want to do one lap that's as fast as possible and you don't have to use it for the race. Everyone goes with softs. But so the tire strategy in qualifying and then to the race means a ton.
Yeah, and I know you're going to get onto the strategies in a second. So just before you segue onto the strategies, on the tire choice piece, I've got to be honest, you've just taught me a whole bunch new because I didn't really know a lot about this. So thank you for that, Brian. But the thing for me that's always interesting is you mentioned about the wets and the inters, and the fascinating thing for me is that gamble when you have a drying track. It's wet enough that everyone's going around on inters, And there's that sweet spot where, you know, there are so many people studying lap times to see, hey, that guy just went in for slicks. So if he can make it round in a faster time than the inters, then you see everyone pile in and change. And it's that swap over between a wet and a dry. And I can't remember the race now. Oh, I wish I could remember the name of the driver. There's a classic race where half the track was wet. I think it was Barrichello. It's going back a number of years now. Half the track was dry, half the track was wet. Everybody went in for inters, and he stayed out because he worked out he was confident enough to drive in the wet part, ice skating on slicks on the wet part. But when on the dry part, it was dry, like proper dry. So anyway, sorry, I let you get back to nerding on stats.
I think it was actually Turkey in 2020 or 2019 when Lewis dried out and he was on a set of inters. And instead of coming in, and will help us out, you lose about 20 to 24 seconds on a pit stop. Instead of losing that time, Lewis stayed out on the inters and burned the tread off. When he came in to finish the race, which he won, which gave him the driver's title that year, it was basically a slick. There was no tread in the middle of the tire, and the camera crews caught it. It was brilliant. So as I was saying, there's a whole team of strategists. To Rob's point, they watch and they think about this. There's literally a team of people with computer simulations to say, if we're going to lose 20 to 25 seconds a pit stop, it has to be worth it. So the second interesting thing, in addition to the qualifying tire choice, is that in every race, in a dry race, you have to pit and change compounds. That is a rule. You cannot come in on mediums and go out on mediums. If you start on mediums, you have to move to something else before the race ends. So as they do this, it's fascinating to figure out what their strategy is. So everyone will have to pit once. Sometimes it's better to pit twice. But again, a team of strategists figures this out because the amount of time you lose as your tire degrades, or as they call it, deg, as the deg occurs, you want to figure out, is it faster to take that hit of 20 to 25 seconds, depending on track, the layout of the pits, how long it takes to get in, how long it takes to get out. Does it offset that by being 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, maybe even up to 0.5 seconds a lap faster on the new tires? And so you weigh that against the things. And what's fascinating to me is there's this thing called an undercut. And I want to highlight it because I don't think enough people kind of like get into this process. But what happens is a car that could be out on worn out tires may pit before the car in front of them. So they're behind, worn out tires, they'll pit. What happens is they come out on fresh tires, they're just caning it around the track. They're just flying. And even if the car in front of them pits on the next lap, they went an entire lap on the worn out tires, whereas the car that had pitted already is on the fresh. And when that happens, you can actually overtake the car that comes out next. So what'll happen is car in front, car number one, car number two behind, car number two pits, fresh tires, does what's called the out lap as fast as possible. And the in lap of the car in front of it, car number one, is so much slower that when they come back out both together, car number two has overtaken it. It's called an undercut. So if you hear about the undercut, what that means is the tires have fallen off enough. It's time to pit. The car behind is pitted earlier. They're on fresher tires, and that makes such a difference, regardless of compound, that now they've pulled off the undercut. And it's not often it happens, but when it does, and in certain tracks, it's very powerful, especially with higher degradation or deg.
And the other thing, I think the final thing on the tires is that what I love is when you get the opposite strategies of two teams. So you'll get the guy that's like trying to sort of coax these tires home a second a lap slower than the guy that's just pitted behind, but he pitted to get the soft one so he can go on the attack. So he's a good full kind of like, I don't know, the full pit stop. He's 25, 30 seconds behind. And you're like, well, he's got no chance now. But the difference between a brand new soft on full-on attack mode where you can brake late, carry speed through corners versus the guy that's kind of limping around on the worn outs. We've seen races where those leads are just eaten into, and you can see it coming, and you'll hear the commentator saying, look, now when we're coming into the back straight, you can see the car that's chasing coming into the view behind, and you think, well, that's miles to catch up yet. And we've had some great finishes to races because of different tire strategies. So Although it's a nerdy subject, it does give some good racing.
I hate to say it, but at the end of Abu Dhabi, I mean, that was the point. Like Max pitted under safety car, put on soft tires. Lewis was on 40 lap old hards, which were bricks and then were good, and now we're just worn out. And so Max put on fresh softs against 40 lap old hards, 40 give or take. I'm estimating here. There was no chance Lewis would win that. That's my point. That's when we talk about why people don't think it's fair. And someone was arguing with me, Mercedes should have pitted. I'd say you never give up track position, but we're not relitigating the end.
I'm waving the ban hammer on this conversation.
Moving on.